Okay, it's been a little while since I've tried to draw some stuff out, so I'm going to try and draw out what's going on during the follicular phase and the luteal phase of the ovarian cycle. Okay, so this all starts off with the hypothalamus releasing GnRH. Okay, so women release more GnRH. Now, the reason that this is released, or more is released, is because there is less negative feedback going on. So GnRH is completely controlled, or mostly controlled, by a negative feedback loop. So when there is high estrogen, then women release less GnRH. So we're going to say right now, and we've seen this in the diagrams that we've shown in class, that there is low levels of estrogen at the end of the follicular phase. And we'll tie back into that in just a minute. So as a result of this high increase in GnRH does a couple of things. One, it increases the amount of FSH that's released, as well as the amount of luteinizing hormone that's released. All right. And so what happens is FSH communicates with the ovaries. And so what this does is that this develops the follicle. Okay. And remember, the follicle are the group of cells that help protect, strengthen, nourish, however you want to look at it, the oocyte. So we increase follicle development or follicle maturation. Okay. At the same time, and so we'll just make this clear here, luteinizing hormone initially leads to an increase in estrogen. All right. So now we've got more estrogen. Okay, and so we're still early on in the follicular phase. All right, so what ends up happening here, this follicle is getting more mature, the egg cell within the follicle is getting more mature, and so we're getting close to ovulation, which is the end of the follicular phase. Well, one of the things that has to happen is that this estrogen has to do something, or it has a job. And so the job of the estrogen here is to increase the uterine lining, okay? So the endometrium, so the uterine lining thickness, okay? And so what that does, so this is getting prepping for, so this is endometrium, that's what I want to say. So this is prepping the uterus in case a woman ends up with a fertilized egg. All right. But what's also interesting is a couple of things. So women end up with a relatively high amount of estrogen. And in this case, high estrogen causes, I'm going to go back to my orange color. It causes more luteinizing hormone to be released. Okay, and so I'm going to kind of move this over here. And so as a result, just kind of coming off, we get this surge. So we're going to call this my luteinizing hormone surge. This leads to ovulation. Okay. And so now there's this surge, and luteinizing hormone release is ovulation, which remember is the release. So it's the follicle ruptures. Mature egg cell is released. Okay, and so this is the follicular phase. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to go down to the luteal phase. Okay, and so what's happening here, so we've got this luteal phase. And so what's important to know is that, again, so here I'm going to write everything. I got to make sure I write colors. Okay, so we've got hypothalamus, anterior pituitary, ovaries, and finally uterus. Okay, so this luteal phase starts here. Okay, so I'm just going to start here. I'll do it with orange because that's orange. So right here is where we start. And so what happens is the ruptured follicle turns into the corpus luteum. So this does a couple of things. One, it releases progesterone and estrogen. Okay, this leads to that thickening, continued thickening of the endometrium. Okay. All right, and so that helps that helps get ready for any possible implantation that occurs. Now, this corpus luteum will only do this for a little while, okay? If there is no fertilized egg, then what happens is, and I'm just going to draw it this way, right here, we get a negative feedback loop. And basically what happens is we're not sending any signals to the corpus luteum to do its job. Okay, and so as a result, the corpus luteum stops sending out progesterone, it stops sending out estrogen, and so the uterine wall eventually breaks down and that leads to menstruation. Okay, now what's also important to know is when we come back up here, this high FSH actually does something else. It's not just a matter of increasing or causing the development of the follicle, but this also, and again, we're going to come down here and it's in the ovaries, this leads to increased inhibin. Okay, and so what inhibin does is it's a negative feedback loop. So high levels of FSH cause the ovaries to release inhibin, which reduces the amount of FSH that's released. Okay, now what also happens, I'm going to try and make this a little bit smaller so we can see everything. I'm not sure how well it's going to work, but there you go, is that specific to progesterone, okay, progesterone also inhibits negative feedback. Okay, and so what it does is it inhibits GnRH, it inhibits LH, and it also inhibits, and I can't draw, it's going to be kind of messy. It also inhibits FSH. So we got a negative feedback loop. So that's what progesterone does. Now estrogen, because the estrogen levels are a little bit lower, it inhibits two things. One, it inhibits FSH, and again, I know that this is getting messy, and it also inhibits GnRH. Okay, so as a result, the follicle development stops. Okay, and that way a woman isn't developing multiple eggs within a short space of time, so that they'd be at different levels of pregnancy, I guess, for lack of a better term. Okay, hopefully this helps out somewhat. But basically what happens is women go through this cycle, and if there is no fertilized egg right here, then what happens is the corpus luteum stops doing its job, which means the uterine lining degrades. Women go through menstruation, and then they get to start the process all over again every 4 weeks.